Are you ready to learn the story of the man who literally made the sun stop in the sky? Welcome to our channel, where we transform the pages of the Bible into unforgettable adventures. Today we will dive into the journey of Joshua, the faithful successor of Moses, who became one of Israel's greatest leaders. From crossing the Jordan River to the walls of Jericho, every step of Joshua's path is marked by astonishing miracles, unwavering faith, and lessons that still resonate today. But don't think this is just another ancient story. Stay until the end, because you will discover transformative secrets about courage, trust, and obedience to God, topics that continue to impact our daily choices. And if you want to receive more inspiring content like this, subscribe to our channel and hit the bell. That way, you won't miss any of our upcoming narratives that will strengthen your faith and biblical knowledge. Prepare your heart, because we are about to explore how Joshua led the people to the Promised Land, faced impossible challenges, and experienced miracles that changed history. Grab your Bible, your curiosity, and join us on this incredible journey. Now let's begin discovering the life and legacy of the man who made the sun stop. Joshua, son of Nun, makes his debut in Scripture as a devoted assistant to Moses, before being recognized as a great commander. He belonged to the tribe of Ephraim, an important branch of Joseph's lineage, which gave him a respected heritage among the Israelites. However, rather than starting in a prominent position, Joshua served with humility, illustrating how true leadership in God's kingdom often develops from a heart willing to learn. His first appearance in action occurs in Exodus 17:8-13, when the Amalekites attack the people just after the exodus from Egypt. Moses chose Joshua to lead the Israelites into battle while he held God's staff up high on the mountain. As Moses kept his hands raised, Israel prevailed, and Joshua, commanding the army, emerged victorious on the battlefield. This episode not only marks Joshua's debut as a military leader, but also demonstrates the trust he placed in divine direction. Yet, Joshua's role went beyond the battles. He was always close to Moses, absorbing valuable lessons. In Exodus 24:13, we see him accompanying his mentor part of the way as they ascended Mount Sinai to receive the Ten Commandments. This direct association with Moses and the opportunity to witness God's wonders prepared him for even greater missions in the future. When we reach chapters 13 and 14 of the book of Numbers, we find Joshua participating in a pivotal mission for the history of Israel, the expedition of the 12 spies sent by Moses to survey the land of Canaan. This was the territory that God had promised his people. But when they returned, most of the spies brought back discouraging reports about the giant inhabitants and fortified cities they encountered. This atmosphere of fear caused the people to lose heart and even rebel against God. At this critical moment, Joshua and Caleb stood out by viewing the situation differently. Instead of focusing only on the challenges, they reminded everyone of God's faithfulness and the promise that they would inherit that land. And as Numbers 14:7-9 relates, both encouraged the people not to rebel or fear the inhabitants there, for God was with them. It wasn't a matter of denying the existence of great obstacles, but of believing that the Lord could overcome them. Joshua's stance, marked by trust and obedience, caught the attention of all Israel. While most of the spies saw reasons to give up, Joshua placed his faith in God's word. As a result of that firm attitude, he and Caleb were the only ones from the generation that left Egypt who were allowed to enter the Promised Land after years of wandering in the desert. This story shows that leadership in God's eyes is not based solely on strength or numbers, but on the willingness to believe and act according to his promises, even when circumstances seem impossible. That unshakable character would soon make Joshua the chosen successor to lead the people in fulfilling the purpose that God had established from the beginning. After Moses' departure, a great transformation in the leadership of Israel was about to take place. Imagine the responsibility of guiding an entire nation that had been under Moses' leadership for over 4 decades, now being transferred to Joshua. Moses was the deliverer, the lawgiver, and the intermediary between the people and God. Taking on such a crucial role was not easy, but God had already prepared Joshua for that special moment. In Joshua chapter 1, we see God calling Joshua in a powerful and encouraging way. He begins with a clear message about the transition of leadership. Moses, my servant, is dead. Now get ready to cross the Jordan River and enter the land I promised to the Israelites. Joshua 1:2. Imagine the impact of these words. Joshua was no longer just Moses' assistant. He was taking command of all the people of Israel on the journey to the Promised Land. But God did not leave Joshua alone on this journey. He gave Joshua clear instructions and an incredible promise of his constant presence. God repeatedly emphasizes the importance of Joshua being strong and courageous, not just physically, but also spiritually and emotionally. Joshua would face many challenges, battles, opposition, and moments of doubt, and he needed to be prepared for them all. That is why God made him a promise even greater than victory in battle, the promise of always being with him. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you will lead this people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors. Joshua 1:5-6. This moment is extremely significant in Joshua's calling. The same God who guided Moses through the Red Sea and the desert was now saying to Joshua, I will be with you just as I was with Moses. God was transferring the same authority and intimate relationship he had with Moses to Joshua. Joshua not only received the mission to conquer the land, but also the assurance that God would be with him every step of the way. This promise was not just for moments of victory, but also for times of difficulty and uncertainty. Moreover, God repeatedly exhorts Joshua to be strong and courageous in Joshua 1:6-9. Why? Because courage is essential when facing unknown and seemingly impossible challenges. Joshua was about to face fortified cities, powerful armies, and a people that had already shown disobedience in the past. It is no wonder that God encouraged him not to fear or be discouraged. Be strong and very courageous. Obey all the law that my servant Moses commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, so that you may be successful wherever you go. Joshua 1:7. God's call for Joshua to be strong and courageous was not limited solely to military battles, but also encompassed spiritual integrity. Joshua's success as a leader depended greatly on his obedience to God's word. And above all, God made it clear that his constant presence was the key to that success. Do not be frightened or dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Joshua 1:9. Whether facing battle, planning the conquest of new objectives, or dealing with internal issues, Joshua knew that God was with him. His success did not come from his own abilities or strength, but from his complete trust and obedience to God. This calling also reminds us that when God calls us to lead or face challenges, he never abandons us. Just as Joshua, we can be strong and courageous because God's presence is always with us. One of the first and most exciting challenges Joshua faced as a leader was the crossing of the Jordan River. Imagine the anticipation of all the people of Israel, who had waited over 40 years for the Promised Land, finally about to enter it. But there was one great obstacle: the Jordan River, which was overflowing due to the harvest season, making the crossing nearly impossible for thousands of people, including women, children, and livestock. But just as God had parted the Red Sea for Moses, he was ready to show his power once again to Joshua and the new generation of Israelites. The Ark of the Covenant, symbolizing the presence of God, would lead this crossing. Joshua gave the order for the priests to carry the ark to the Jordan. And then, something extraordinary happened. As soon as the priests carrying the ark reached the Jordan and touched the water, the current stopped and formed a wall of water far away, allowing the whole people to cross the river on dry land in front of Jericho. Joshua 3:15-16. This miracle clearly showed the Israelites that God was still with them, just as he had been with Moses. The crossing of the Jordan was a mirror of what happened at the Red Sea, reaffirming that the same God who delivered them from Egypt would now guide them into the Promised Land. For the new generation who had never witnessed the Exodus, it was a powerful confirmation of God's continuous presence and power. But the crossing of the Jordan was more than just passing a river. It was a moment of deep faith. By bringing the Ark of the Covenant into the water, the priests were leading the people with total trust in God. They stepped into the water before the miracle occurred, demonstrating unshakable confidence. This act of faith teaches us that we are often called to take steps even when we do not see the complete path, trusting that God will make the impossible happen. The priests carrying the Lord's Ark stood firmly on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan while all Israel passed, until the whole nation had crossed on dry land. Joshua 3:17. Imagine the scene. Hundreds of thousands of Israelites walking on dry ground, with the Ark of the Covenant in the center, holding back the river's waters. It was a historic moment for Israel, marking the end of their desert journey and the beginning of their conquest of the Promised Land. This event also solidified Joshua's leadership. The people saw with their own eyes that God was acting through Joshua, just as he had done with Moses. In Joshua 4, God instructed Joshua to do something special. Each of the 12 tribes was to take a stone from the middle of the Jordan, where the priests had stood. These stones would serve as a memorial for future generations, reminding them of God's faithfulness. In the future, when your children ask, "What do these stones mean?" tell them, "The flow of the Jordan was halted before the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. When the Ark crossed the Jordan, the waters stopped." These stones are to be an everlasting memorial to the people of Israel. Joshua 4:6-7. These stones served as a physical reminder of the miracle God performed, ensuring that each future generation would remember to trust in the God who keeps his promises and is always present to help his people. Perhaps the most famous victory of Joshua, and one of the most memorable moments in the Bible, is the fall of the walls of Jericho. This fortified city, known for its impenetrable walls, was the first obstacle on the Israelites' journey to the Promised Land. From a military perspective, conquering Jericho seemed impossible. However, God had an extraordinary plan, completely different from conventional human strategies. The instructions that God gave to Joshua seemed strange and even illogical to people's eyes. Instead of employing traditional military tactics, such as building ramps or using battering rams, God commanded a unique method: marches, trumpets, and shouts. Joshua instructed the people to march around the city once a day for 6 days, carrying the Ark of the Covenant, the symbol of God's presence. 7 priests were to blow trumpets made from ram's horns, and in addition, everyone was to remain silent. This pattern was repeated for 6 days. On the 7th day, something incredible was to happen. They would march around the city 7 times, and at the end of the 7th lap, the priests would blow the trumpets, and the people would let out a great shout. When the trumpets sounded, the army shouted, and at the sound of the trumpets and the shout, the walls fell down. Each person advanced from his place, and the city was taken. Joshua 6:20. Imagine the scene: an entire army marching in silence for 6 days, with only the sound of trumpets breaking the quiet. On the 7th day, after the 7th lap, a great battle cry caused the walls of Jericho to collapse as if they were made of paper. Joshua followed God's orders to the letter. even though they seemed absurd from a human point of view. This victory shows us Joshua's deep faith in God. He did not rely on his own military skills, but placed his complete trust in the divine plan, even when that plan defied all human logic. Joshua's unshakable obedience to God's will is one of the most remarkable characteristics of his leadership. But why did God choose such an unusual method for the Battle of Jericho? There are several important lessons to be learned. First, this story demonstrates that true victory comes from God, not from human effort. By using a strategy that no one could understand or replicate, God ensured that the glory of the conquest would be His, not man's. Second, it was a test of obedience for the people of Israel. Marching in silence for 6 days might have seemed pointless and demotivating, but Joshua maintained trust and determination to follow God's plan, even when others might have doubted or lost patience. Finally, the fall of Jericho served as a powerful testimony to the neighboring nations that God was fighting on Israel's side. Rahab, the woman who helped the Israelite spies, had already recognized God's power, Joshua 2:9-11. And this miracle reinforced that truth for everyone. After the fall of the walls, the Israelites completely conquered Jericho. God commanded them to destroy the city and consecrate everything to the Lord, not allowing them to take any plunder for themselves. Only Rahab and her family were spared because of her faith and courage in protecting the spies. Joshua 6:22-25. This victory was not just about a city, but also a demonstration of God's justice and holiness. Moreover, the story of Rahab shows God's mercy. A Canaanite woman was saved by her faith, evidencing that divine grace is available to all who trust in Him. The fall of Jericho marked a turning point in the conquest of Canaan, showing that with God by Joshua's side and with the people of Israel, no obstacle was insurmountable. This event not only reinforced Joshua's leadership, but also inspired ongoing confidence and faith in the hearts of all the Israelites, constantly reminding them of the power and faithfulness of God in fulfilling His promises. Before the famous battle in which Joshua asked the sun to stand still, there was an intriguing diplomatic incident that paved the way for this extraordinary miracle. It all began with the Gibeonites, a powerful people living in Canaan. They were terrified after hearing of Joshua's incredible victories at Jericho and Ai. Aware that God was with Israel, the Gibeonites decided to act to save their lives, resorting to a clever plan to deceive the Israelites. The Gibeonites pretended to be ambassadors from a distant land. They wore old clothes, carried worn-out wineskins, and brought dry bread as proof of a long journey. Joshua 9:9-10. Without consulting God, Joshua and the elders of Israel believed the deception and made a peace treaty. Then Joshua made a peace treaty with them, assuring them their lives would be spared, and the community leaders ratified it with an oath. Joshua 9:15. Soon after, they discovered that the Gibeonites were in fact their neighbors, a people whom they were supposed to expel from Canaan. However, because they had sworn not to harm them, Joshua and the leaders decided to honor the treaty, even though they knew it went against God's commandments. Instead of destroying the Gibeonites, Joshua made them servants of Israel, tasked with cutting wood and carrying water for the congregation. This alliance did not go unnoticed by the other Canaanite nations. Joshua's decision to spare Gibeon enraged the neighboring kings, who saw it as a betrayal and a threat to their own power. In response, 5 Amorite kings, led by Adoni-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, united their armies to attack Gibeon and simultaneously attempt to destabilize Joshua's advance. Joshua 10:3-5. Feeling surrounded and with no other option, the Gibeonites sent an urgent appeal to Joshua. "Do not abandon your servants. Come quickly and save us. Help us, for all the Amorite kings of the hills have joined forces against us." Joshua 10:6. Although Joshua had been deceived by the Gibeonites, he felt compelled to honor the treaty. He gathered his army and marched through the night in a surprise attack to rescue Gibeon. At that crucial moment, God encouraged Joshua once again. "Do not fear them. I have delivered them into your hands. None of them will be able to stand against you." Joshua 10:8. With that divine assurance, Joshua led the Israelites against the coalition of 5 kings. The surprise and determination of Israel caused great confusion among the enemies, who began to flee in panic. God intervened supernaturally, sending hailstones upon the fleeing Amorites, killing more soldiers with the hail than with the swords of the Israelites. Joshua 10:11. But the battle was not yet completely won. The sun was setting and many enemies might still escape during the night. It was then that Joshua made a bold request to God. "Sun, stop in the midst of Gibeon, and you, moon, in the valley of Ajalon." Joshua 10:12. And what happened was simply extraordinary. The sun stopped and the moon stood still until the nation had avenged itself on its enemies. The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and did not set for almost an entire day. Joshua 10:13. God suspended the natural laws to ensure Israel's victory. Daylight was prolonged, allowing Joshua and his army to pursue and completely defeat their enemies. This unprecedented miracle not only guaranteed victory, but also reaffirmed God's sovereignty over all creation and his faithfulness in keeping his promises. This story teaches us several important lessons. First, it shows that true strength and victory come from God, not merely from human effort. Second, it highlights the importance of honoring our commitments and treaties even when difficulties arise. And finally, it reinforces the idea that with faith and trust in God, we can overcome any obstacle, no matter how impossible it may seem. God's intervention in the Battle of Gibeon is a powerful testimony to his constant presence and commitment to guide and protect his people. Joshua, with his unwavering faith and obedience, became an exemplary leader, demonstrating that when we place complete trust in God, nothing is impossible. After conquering great battles, Joshua's journey as the leader of Israel took a new turn, from military commander to a wise and diligent administrator. This phase of his leadership was as crucial as the previous battles, for now Joshua had the responsibility to distribute the promised land among the 12 tribes of Israel, fulfilling the promise God had made to Abraham many centuries before. Thus Joshua took the whole land, just as the Lord had said to Moses, and gave it as an inheritance to Israel, dividing it among the tribes. Joshua 11:23. This division of the land was not just a matter of allocating territories, but a profoundly spiritual act essential to the identity of the people of Israel. The promised land represented much more than a place to live. It was the physical realization of God's covenant, a legacy passed from Abraham to Isaac, to Jacob, and now to Joshua and the people of Israel. Receiving this inheritance meant that God was fulfilling his covenant, establishing Israel as his chosen people in a special land. Joshua was extremely careful in dividing the land, respecting the boundaries that God and Moses had established. To determine the specific areas for each tribe, lots were cast, Joshua 14:2, showing that this distribution followed the divine will rather than human preferences. Each tribe received its portion of land according to its needs and the role it would play within the nation. A memorable moment in this process was the special inheritance granted to Caleb, Joshua's faithful companion, who had shown great courage when spying out Canaan years earlier. At 85 years old, Caleb reminded Joshua of the promise Moses had made and asked to claim the mountainous region of Hebron, inhabited by the Anakim, a race of giants. Even in advanced age, Caleb fully trusted in God's strength to overcome. "Now therefore give me this mountain region which the Lord promised me at that time. With the help of the Lord, I will drive them out, just as he promised." Joshua 14:12. Joshua granted Caleb's request by giving him Hebron, demonstrating that God rewards faithfulness and trust. Another important aspect was the inheritance of the 1.5 tribes, Reuben, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh, that chose to settle east of the Jordan River. They fulfilled their commitment to help in the conquest and, after the victory, returned to the lands that Moses had assigned to them. This act reinforced the unity of the people of Israel even in the face of geographical challenges. Joshua's dedication in ensuring that each tribe received its allotted portion of land evidences his commitment to fulfilling God's promises. It was not merely an administrative or logistical matter. It was the formal establishment of the nation of Israel in covenant with the Lord, settling in a territory that had been reserved for them since the time of the patriarchs. This phase of Joshua's leadership teaches us about the importance of organization, justice, and faith in carrying out God's plans. Dividing the land among the tribes not only ensured that each group had its own space to prosper, but also solidified God's covenant with Israel, ensuring that his promise of a blessed land was fully accomplished. When Joshua was nearing the end of his life, after faithfully leading the Israelites to the promised land and fulfilling his role as God's chosen leader, he gathered the people for one final powerful message. Recorded in chapters 23 and 24 of Joshua, this farewell speech marks the culmination of his years of service to God and Israel. On that occasion, Joshua reminded everyone of the great works the Lord had performed for them, encouraged the renewal of their covenant with God, and challenged each person to choose whom they would serve. In his old age, Joshua knew his days were numbered. He had witnessed firsthand God's faithfulness, from the miracle of crossing the Jordan, through the fall of Jericho's walls, to the countless battles that secured the conquest of the land. Although the land was now divided among the tribes, Joshua was aware of the dangers still threatening the people, especially the temptation to stray and worship the false gods of neighboring nations. In his final address, Joshua emphasized the importance of remaining faithful to the Lord. He began by reminding the Israelites of all the wonders God had performed for them, from the deliverance from Egypt to the parting of the Red Sea and the victories over their enemies. The message was clear. Every conquest, every blessing, and every victory came from the Lord and should not be forgotten. You yourselves have seen all that the Lord your God did to all those nations for your sake. It was the Lord your God who fought for you. Joshua 23:3. Joshua also warned the people not to mix with the remaining nations that still served false gods. He underscored the need to remain holy and loyal to the covenant that God had made with them. Be very careful to obey all that is written in the book of the law of Moses, not turning aside to the right or to the left. Do not associate with those remaining nations among you. Do not invoke the name of their gods or swear by them. Joshua 23:6-7. This warning was based on Joshua's deep understanding of the human heart and the tendency of people to stray. He reminded them that if they abandoned the Lord and the covenant, they would face severe consequences. The same God who had blessed them would also discipline them if they turned away from his ways. In Joshua 24, the leader gathered all the people in Shechem to reaffirm the covenant. He challenged each individual to choose whom they would serve, either the Lord or the false gods of the neighboring nations. With emotion, Joshua presented the evidence of God's faithfulness and concluded by saying, "Now, therefore, the land is before you. Choose for yourselves whom you will serve, whether the gods which your ancestors served that were beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Joshua 24:15. Joshua not only spoke, but he also established a public testimony to God's faithfulness. He ended his legacy by asking the people to acknowledge and commit themselves to the Lord, ensuring that the divine covenant would continue to guide and bless them. This farewell from Joshua teaches us the importance of remembering and renewing our commitment to God. It shows us that, even after great conquests, it is essential to maintain our faith and loyalty, always trusting in God's promises and following His ways with integrity and obedience. The story of Joshua is a powerful testimony of what God can accomplish through someone who chooses to trust and obey completely. From the moment he led the crossing of the Jordan River, to the miraculous fall of the walls of Jericho, to the countless battles he won with courage and faith, Joshua's journey is marked by unwavering dedication to God's commandments. Every step he took showed how faith, courage, and obedience can transform impossible challenges into extraordinary victories. Joshua challenged all the people of Israel to choose whom they would serve, setting an example for all of us. In the same way, we are called to reflect. Are you willing to follow God with all your heart in every area of your life? Just as Joshua led the Israelites with confidence and determination, we too can find inspiration to face our own challenges with the same faith and obedience. Find strength in Joshua's story, and remember that when we walk in obedience to God, He is always by our side, guiding and sustaining us. May Joshua's journey inspire you to trust more deeply and act with courage in your own life. If you felt inspired by this story, be sure to like, share this video with friends and family, and subscribe to our channel for more content that brings the eternal stories and lessons of the Bible in an engaging and accessible way. Activate the notifications bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming biblical adventures. Let's learn and grow in faith together, strengthening our walk with God with each new video. Until the next incredible story.